I begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. This House believes that states should heavily invest in video games as a significant educational tool for the future. So to begin with, I would like to show you what heavily investing means. So heavily investing means is putting more and emulating on what is happening in those countries that have actually done this. It's just a matter of putting more than what you've been doing. It's heavily investing in this case. So as the team affirmatives, what we are talking about is that the states should actually heavily invest in video games as a significant significant educational tool for the future. So what do we take as, what are these forms of video games we are talking about? The forms of video games we are talking about, these are the mathematical games, the quizzes and puzzles that take place on internet, then the watching the matching of letters, encyclopedia and dictionary games, then also science practical games. These are science practical animations or games. So one of the things we have is the examples of the S.S.S. This is one of the examples of the science practical games. So for us as team affirmatives, those are the video games we are encouraging in schools. They are the video games we are encouraging in schools. So we want to look at the countries that have done this. We have countries like China, we have countries like USA, we have countries like Europe, and countries like Vietnam and Singapore. These countries have done this. They have engaged this in their schools. Students are actually experiencing this, what is actually not happening in some of the countries that are actually not emulating this. So we are seeing that these countries actually, what is happening when they are doing this? They are having advanced technology because these things actually increase and motivate students to think more than what they think. Because you all know how a computer is competitive in IQ. So these students are also engaged to actually think the same way. And the other thing we are seeing that these countries are actually having high innovation, and this innovation is beginning from schools. These students are coming up with these things and innovating them. Then we are having problem solving maximized. We are having students solving all these problems that are happening in their countries. Then the other thing, we're having high quality education. We all know right now what we are fighting for is education. And what do we look at? Education in the future. These countries are already doing it. Then what of these other countries that are not doing it should heavily invest, because that's what we are going to compete for in the future. This is what the students in other countries are doing. So these countries should also invest more so that they compete on that high IQ that is going to happen in the future. So if the negatives come here and say they are not actually believing in that, then they should tell us where they are going to leave their children who are actually not having video games in the schools, and where are they going to be in the future that we are talking about? Because we are seeing some of the countries that are emulating this are actually developing on a high speed, and we are actually advocating for development. So they should come and tell us. So let them not come here and tell us about distraction that is going to happen in classes, because this is not actually going to happen. Because right now we are having video games that teach about fighting and everything outside school, and this is where students are going to be diverted to. But what if we have them in schools and these are actually teaching video games? So these students are not going to be distracted. So one of the things that you should not talk about is about the implementation, because this is actually going to be about balanced and timetabled to reduce the risk of the health hazard, whereby students concentrate on only their video games. This is actually going to be balanced. So them don't come here and tell us about the capacity of countries to do this, because we see that Uganda, the government has built 232 schools of seed schools in 5 years, and these schools have computers, electricity and everything. So the countries have capacity. One of our arguments is that we need to cater for diverse education that will help us in the future. Then the other thing is that we need to prepare the students for the digital future world that is coming. Then the other thing is that these games promote critical thinking and problem solving. These things increase the students' interest in learning. So these students will be actually interested in learning. So these negatives should not come here and ask us about and tell us about, because I've actually talked about how these video games will not lead to distraction. I beg to rest my case.
I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, and 1. Now, this is what we get from Team Affirmative. They come and tell us here that we need to invest in video games as significant education tools. Now, and this is what they tell us. They tell us that, you know what, China, Europe, and Singapore are actually doing this, but they have advanced technology. Is that what we have in a country like Uganda? Are we having this advanced technology in Uganda? Is that our current status quo as a country? Is that what Kenya is having as per now? So what we actually need to look up for is actually advancing our technologies before we bring up these video games as a significant tool. That is what we actually need to look at. Now, what they bring us as what they are going to do, they are characterizing actually these video games as actually learning things in school. These science games they're talking about, these word games they're talking about that actually help students to learn. Yes, they do help the students to learn, but let us account for the fact that students are easily taken away. Let us account for the concentration of a student when you're using a video game. A gadget, in naturality, a gadget is something that can actually take you away. Your concentration can be taken away, as we say. Now, they come and tell us that we shouldn't talk about distraction because actually it is catered for. Actually, it is not catered for to the high rates. Anyone can use a gadget to what you want it to. You can use it actually, or maybe manipulate it to what you want it to do. Now, that is what we get them from. Now, what we get from Team Affirmative is actually also they're saying that the government has been able to build 232 schools as seeds. Now, let us look at the status quo of these schools. Actually, these schools are suffering in actually implementing the new curriculum that the education sector sets today. Now, we are fighting. What they are telling us is actually they have been able to build, but look at the infrastructure these seed schools have. Look at the implementation they are using. These schools actually, some don't have laboratories, whereby when it reaches times for UNEB, we have to go to another school to do practicals. That is what they are telling us. So we actually need to invest more in actually doing what? Making the situation, not making the infrastructure of the schools better. We need to learn, we need to better the learning environment of these students, such that rather than bringing the video games that actually bring up concentration problems in schools. Now, they're only talking about the learning games. They're not accounting for the games like FIFA. They're only bringing this because it favors their side. They're not accounting for how the students actually, we have vast video games in this school, in this country. Now, when they talk about high innovation, we actually are acquainted with the knowledge that the fact that high innovation comes with a cost of actually creative learning. So if you have not catered for the root cause of this creative learning, we are not catering for the innovation that comes in the future. And then what has Team Affirmative, what has Team Negative come here to tell you? The fact that we are not heavily investing in these video games because actually they have a role to play in society. They have a recreational role to play in society. So we are not actually heavily investing in this, but we actually acknowledge the fact that we need to invest in them. Where we are right now and how we are investing in them is actually where we need to be, because we don't need to heavily invest in them, because actually we have a lot of things we need to invest to. We have the learning environment that we need to invest to. We have the teachers comfortability that we need to invest to, because actually we are not accounting for the fact that these teachers that are actually taken to other areas and they are learning and that they are teaching these students, but the conditions at which they stay are not the best. They're using these government apartments or buildings that actually have been taken a long time without renovation. This is actually what we need to focus to. Now, as Team Negative, what do we say? We don't need to invest in it. We don't need to heavily invest in it as a significant tool, because after all, if you remove a video game, that does not stop learning. If you remove this video game, learners have actually vast ways of learning that are better than these video games, because actually they talk about concentration, meaning they actually acknowledge the fact that these video games take you from the concentration. Now, what do they tell us? We need to prepare these students for digital learning. Yes, we are doing so. But in the new curriculum, what we bring about, we actually need to use this ICT, the one they call the digital world, to do research. This is actually promoting this, using the ICT things in the right way, but not using them for video games. So actually, it takes you away from the concentration of learning. Now, for how long will a student be depending on these video games to learn? This is actually supposed to come back to our world, where we tell you we actually not need to heavily invest in this as a significant tool, because even if you remove it today, it does not affect society. We have been learning without these things. Now, what we need to do is focus on the teaching area. And one thing that I'm asking, what are they targeting? The people they are targeting to have actually been using these video games and they have not been prospering. They have actually been, their concentration span has been taken away. Now just erase my case.
Dear Judge, we are comparing two worlds. A world where video games are highly invested in, and a world where we stick to the status quo as possible. We come to tell you that actually we are fighting the problem in the status quo, and problem in the status quo can only be fought when we actually introduce something new. And this is what Team Affirmative fails to understand completely. They still stick to these problems that we already have, ladies and gentlemen. We tell them that in states like Uganda, like Kenya and all that, there is no investment in these video games, and that's why we see there is low educational quality, ladies and gentlemen, and that is what we come here as Team Negative, as Team Affirmative, to correct such stuff. Now, their main worry is that there is no technological advancement in these states. But this is actually what we actually did, that since there is no technological advancement, there is need for us to invest in this very highly, so that we promote these video games. Now, I'm going to give you a world like China, a world like USA, ladies and gentlemen. Let us try to look at their educational system. We think that the educational system is actually so much advanced compared to the educational system that we stick in the status quo right now, like in Uganda and all that. So we think that on the point of technological advancement, there is need for us to put more effort on these, ladies and gentlemen. I want to pick you later. Now, secondly, they tell us that students' mind can easily be diverted when they put this. Now, let me give you this world. We think that in a world, what makes this students' mind diverted is that they really like actually to play these video games, ladies and gentlemen. So when it's not inclusive in the educational content, then we think that when they are in class, they get bored and they think of going, ladies and gentlemen, to practice all these video games from outside, and that is how diversion of mind comes in. So we think that when actually we have to include this in the education system, ladies and gentlemen, and invest more, then the educational content are actually going to be in form of video, where these people are motivated to practice more and also to critically think. This is something they fail to understand in their old world. They also come and tell us that the new curriculum teachers or government is actually trying to find difficulty in implementing all this new curriculum. But we think that one of the reasons as to why there is a problem or a challenge in implementing this, one, we think that actually students are not motivated to embrace this new curriculum because it does not have this video game, ladies and gentlemen, something that actually motivates them. So we think that is the main problem. Now, telling us about the capacity of the government to implement this, we think that one, the government in about 5 years has built about 232 schools, and these schools have electricity, they have internet, ladies and gentlemen. So we think that the government have capacity to implement this. So let them come and account for how much is needed how much is needed, ladies and gentlemen, to invest in this that the government cannot manage. So we think that on the point of the capacity of the government has capacity. The only thing here is to invest in such kind of stuff, ladies and gentlemen, to put in. Now, what do we tell you what do we get? We actually need to achieve long-term kind of effect, ladies and gentlemen, and we actually approaching a digital world where everyone is competitive. So when we actually bring this and include it in our curriculum, or invest in it, then we are going to be exposing these children or students to a digital world, ladies and gentlemen, where they will be critically thinking. Now, what do we actually get from our side of the world, ladies and gentlemen, after breaking everything that comes from the world? We think that on the issue, this is going to cater for diversity. What are we trying to say? This we have students who actually get more motivated when they actually use this ICT, and this ICT is in forms of video games. We tell you the forms of video games that you're going to put in. This is actually so much educational, ladies and gentlemen, that makes them to think critically. Let us try to see at the innovation that takes place in America, ladies and gentlemen. We think that these people actually provide a lot of competent product that is incomparable with what is happening in the African state, ladies and gentlemen, all the states that have not actually embraced video games. So we think that embracing video games and investing more in it is one of the tools that is going to allow us to compete in the outside world, ladies and gentlemen. This is what we are trying to look at. Now we think what problem comes in their world. When we stick to the current status quo, there will be poverty because these students' mind will be diverted and they will not actually continue to exist in this. I beg to rest.
I'm beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. My advice to Team Affirmative, look before you leap. The status quo is actually not the fact that we need video games. The status quo is actually that Uganda or these other countries that are not involving in these video games do not have the facilities yet. The status quo is that we don't have the infrastructure. The status quo is that we don't have the buildings. Now they are coming up. Their major points are that the government has built schools, the government has capacity. But we've seen that many governments are actually bringing up what is the state of these schools right now. These schools are actually schools whereby teachers are rioting. These schools are schools where students are having water leak through lessons that teachers are teaching. These are schools whereby students don't even eat lunch. Is this where they're going to bring the technology that they're actually asking for? I was, by the way, expecting the following things from Team Affirmative. They were supposed to tell us who's going to buy the video games? How are the students going to get these video games? How many students are going to get these video games? No, they're bringing us countries like China and USA. These are developed countries which first focus on the infrastructure, countries which focus on their teaching education system, and then went on to invest in things like video games. But we have not yet focused on our infrastructure. We have not yet focused on our teaching system, but once they are leaping to something bigger. The reasons that's why African countries are actually not developing is because we want to jump steps. We want to skip steps in terms of going protocol by protocol, because these other countries like China and USA have gone step by step. They first developed the infrastructure, they first improved the education system, and then they're getting the video games. But why are we skipping? We don't have good infrastructure. They're coming up telling us the system of how government is building many schools. How many schools are developed? You have not yet granted UPOI. How are these schools? How are these schools being better right now? Now they came up telling us that we have to jump into a world of digital, we have to go into the world of being more digitalized and things of this sort. But let's first look at this. We are looking at a situation, a world whereby students, the countries they are comparing us with, there's countries that are years in front of us. They have good infrastructure, they have good everything. We can't catch up by rushing into this thing. We have to go step by step. And now the other loophole in their case is that the question is we have to ask ourselves today is that, are video games really significant? Account for the distraction. Account for the fact that we have actually been passing in these schools without these video games. Account for how much these video games will be adding up. Now, the judges, I was expecting the second speaker to tell us how these students are going to get these games. They didn't say that, and I don't expect that in the third speech because there is no space for new points. They didn't give us who's going to give us these video games. They didn't tell us the source of income. Government is actually cutting people's budgets by 50% because they don't have money and expecting them to get money for video games. Now, they said that we need long-term changes. Now, members of the August South, I want us to bring this into our own eyes. Let's put it on a wing scale. On video games and buildings that will last forever, which is more sustainable, which will last for longer. We said video games as things. First of all, video games are very hefty. When you get them, you have to make sure you maintain them. You have to make sure they are new all the time. You have to make sure that there is network and connection. How many areas in these developing countries have connections and networks? How many students will you give these video games? How will these schools access these video games? Now, this is what they are failing to show us. Now, as Team Negative, we are coming up and saying that good, video games may be very good and very nice, but it's not what we are looking for right now. What we need right now is development in infrastructure. What we need to heavily invest in is bettering our education system. How? Making sure that we have enough teachers in these schools, making sure that we have proper assessment of our students, making sure that we have communication lines going to these villages. Then when we bring the video games, it will be convenient. The problem in their video game ideas that they're going to bring them, but they have to bring the following things as well. There are areas in countries that don't have electricity. There are areas that don't have infrastructure. When they bring the video games, how will they sell them? Most of the students are actually suffering when they sell the video games to get money, when they sell these video games to get other things in life. I rest my case. Thank you so much.
This House believes that states should heavily invest in video games as a significant education tool for the future. Now, Pano, Team Negative here comes with their major impact that people are not going to be concentrating on any of it all. They come here and tell us that the government is actually not having money. But when we read this resolution, we realize that the government is actually having the money. But where are they going to invest what in this money? So where are they going to invest this money? That's what we're trying to prove to them. Now, they come here and tell us that they want to develop infrastructures. But tell them that when we invest we heavily invest in these video games, that means you are going to put up these infrastructures that are going to be holding up these computers, that are going to be having this where the video games is going to be concentrating on. Now they come and tell us that schools are having schools are poor standards of schools. But that's the thing that we should invest in these video games so that we can improve on the standards of these schools and are going to be able to accommodate all these things that you're talking about. Now they come here and tell us that people are actually going to be taken away by these video games. But we give them an example of the video games that we're actually going to use. The examples of puzzle games, quiz games, that are going to be helping people to actually critically think at the end of it all. That's what these people are actually telling us. Now they came and gave us, they spoke about other games like Denied, they spoke about other games like FIFA and all that, how we are going to talk about them. But now I would like to, let me even use that. We realize that students today concentrate so much on video games. Someone is in class thinking about these video games at home. Now if we heavily invest, we involve these video games in the education system, should these people actually be able to concentrate more in their classes rather than thinking about them. If these video games are actually in their schools, that's why people are actually going to be thinking about them and they're going to be concentrating more in developing our education system. Right of it all. They come and tell us that that the government is actually having a problem of new curriculum, developing the new curriculum at the end of it all. But the government is having, I would like to tell them that this new curriculum is actually based on the students' skills mainly. But now if you develop this post skills on thinking of using these video games, that means you're actually fighting the problem of what the new curriculum that they're talking about. That's why the government should actually invest heavily in these video games. Now they still come and tell us that there's the significance at the end of it all. We give them examples of countries that have taken up this model. Countries like China, USA, Singapore. We realize they took up this thing and there's been a very significant impact on their education system. We realize their education system is actually far better than theirs because they're actually using these games, the critical thinking games. People are actually able to think critically, they're actually able to think and advance more. They're actually developing more. That's what we need in countries like Uganda. Now, Pando, this debate here has been narrowed down to two major clash points. That is heavy investment and the video games. They fail to understand heavy investment in their world. They're talking about the infrastructure and all those things. That's why they want to invest. But we as Team Affirmative come and tell them that if we heavily invest in all this, we actually going to develop these infrastructures that they're actually talking about. We are going to develop these schools, and then these video games will actually be there. People actually going to critically think on, and then develop the education system. Then even the video games, they still fail to understand the video games we're actually talking about. We give them the video games that we're actually thinking on, the critical thinking games, the puzzle thinking games, and all those things. That's what we as Team Negative come here and prove to them, I know it all, but they fail to understand it. Now, they still come here and tell us that we should use actually ICT for research. But I like to tell them that even this research they're actually talking about, students actually go away from it. People actually start using the internet for other things. But now, that's why we are telling them that if these video games are actually introduced in schools, we as students actually think more on these things, we're actually going to be able to think further, develop the critical thinking, and then develop the education system at large. That's what Team Negative fails to understand the end of it all. Now they still come here and talk about how there is no money in any of this, but still tell them that this ocean clearly states that there's actually money. But the thing is, where are they going to invest this money? That's why we as Team Affirmative come here and say they should heavily invest this money in video games as a significant tool in education for the future. With that, I beg to submit. Thank you.
Judge, we are trying something new, and I've happened to accept the status quo that is in Uganda right now. They've happened to accept that there's developing countries that their status quo is low. I would like you to remember that by the second speaker of their Team Affirmative. This is what he said. We are not going to stick to the problems that are already in their countries. So what is this? Are we going to stick to why? I'm not even understanding them. Reason being, are they going to bring these video games to people who are studying under trees? Are they going to bring video games to people who are studying in whatever situation, whether bad or good? They've not happened to show us which type of infrastructure are they bringing, which type of infrastructure are they bringing to these video games. They're just telling us, we are heavily investing in these video games. Now guess what? They've not happened to show us the significance of these video games. Guess what? They're just giving us countries that are far developed more than the developing countries, in which they are just cutting the salaries of the ministers by 50%, and then they're just telling us, with the governments are able. Now, Judge, we are now getting confused with our Team Affirmatives. Now, denied. Judge, this is what they bring to us. They in fact, are hoping to tell us that they know that concentration is gonna be recurring. Now, Judge, this is what the third speaker happened to tell us, that people in classes are thinking about the video games at homes. So this just shows us that they're rebutting themselves and they're just confusing themselves. What do you bring to your house? That this concentration will not be high since the students' concentration is narrow, and in fact it is so. In fact, it will be so down as they're having the video games. And guess what? This is what they tell us. There is ICT in the new curriculum. And guess what? This ICT we are talking about, people can easily get what? Can easily get off the ICT. Now, this shows us that it is back to their case. Reason being, they are talking about video games. Video games fall in the category of ICT. What does this mean? That this thing is gonna come back to our house. Reason being, their concentration is still narrow. Now, Judge, they are talking about that. You know what? Denied. Now, Judge, they are telling us that we are going to bring these they are talking about the advancement of technology. They happen to accept our status quo in the developing country. How are you going to advance the technology, yet the technology in those areas happen to tell you that it is low, and you're telling us that, you know what, we are going to bring in the video games, reason being your technology, and you're going to accept that status quo, that, you know what, I'm not going to stick to the problems that are already in this country. So what does that mean? That these people are just confusing themselves, and they're going to just keep on confusing themselves. Now, Judge, the other thing they happen to tell us that, you know what? Now, what do we bring to your house? We are in a world whereby the internet is not the same. It is always changing, and guess what? It is low and narrow. We're having schools that their infrastructure is low. It is, the teachers are not heavily paid. The teachers are rioting. The teachers are having. The infrastructure is low. The new curriculum they are talking about, that the government has built 230 schools. The same government is the one which is crippling. We're having a crippled education system, and it's the same system. They want to bring in a new thing. Now, guess what? The different governments have even told us, you know what? Our new curriculums are not helping us, like the people rioting about the new curriculum in Uganda. Now they are telling us that, you know what, we are bringing in something new. How is this something new going to help their world? Yet we are telling them that, you know what, already have problems that are high, and then how are they going to help these students? They're not looking at the fact that there are students that are not having this, they're having money to buy these video games. They're not looking at students at schools which cannot have this technology they are talking about. So as I rest my case, Team Affirmative does not have any right to put in the video games they're talking about.
I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, and 1. Now, Judge, one thing Team Affirmative fails to understand, that it is bad to skip infancy and reach the levels before actually knowing that infancy is important. Now, this is how actually they come to our world. They tell us that, you know what, we need to get at this, we need to bring these video games and actually do what? Develop the education sector. Meaning what they're actually bringing to our world is that they'll have to do what? They'll have to first develop the infrastructure that is down to bring in their video games. That is where their world actually comes into ours. You first need to go to the low steps, then reach high. Because China did not wake up one day and look like China, we are developed. They first develop the infrastructure they have, then reach where they are. It is bad to skip infancy before you reach adulthood. Now this is where our world is better. Our world is better is because we account for that rural school, we account for that school that is actually in bad states, we account for that rural school, or we account for those schools that actually are still having teachers that are complaining of how they stay. We are accounting for those schools that actually have slow internet to accommodate their video games. We are accounting for that school that actually, for those places that actually do what? We are accounting for those schools that actually don't have the capability to do this. And when we tell them government doesn't have money, they argue. We bring you a world whereby Parliament's budget has been cut by 50%. We are bringing you a world whereby these people that some doctors are not being paid their salary to fullness. We are bringing you a world whereby that 50% of our budget as Uganda is actually funded by other people or by debts. Now, how are we going to actually bring this to account? And we are bringing you a world whereby we don't need to stop investing in these video games because actually they have a significance of recreation. We actually don't need to heavily invest in them because they're not significant in the educational world. Now they bring us a world whereby these people are not concentrating in class because they think of their video games at home, like FIFA. Boys actually love playing this. The girls love playing things like netball and everything. So we actually look, they are bringing that world, that thing of not concentrating in class, not concentrating at their education, because actually what they're bringing to us is that we don't have concentration at all. Now we bring you a world where investing in video games is not significant at all, but you can invest in it because it has a significant role of playing as you have a significant role of playing as a recreation tool. Now, Judge, our world wins because we actually account for everyone that is actually related to this case. Where's my case?
Now, dear Judge, I think in this debate, Team Affirmative wins it easily because we have seen a lot of contradiction that comes from the part of the world. They come and tell us that before putting video games, they need first to invest in structures. This is an indication that even after investing in structures, they're going to bring video game in, ladies and gentlemen. Or when we think that actually that fails in their world, in their second speech, they come and tell us that video game actually diverts people's attention. That is an indication of telling us that video game is actually bad. So we don't understand their stance in this debate, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the point of concentration that we talk about, we tell them that actually people are not concentrating in class because of boredom, because they think that they need to go and watch Manju, they think that they need to go and use video games at home. So we tell them that when this video game is inclusive in the education system and we invest more, then there will be high concentration in this education system, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why we think that we take on that issue. Their main issue was to come and justify the significance of education, the significance in the education system right now that there is no video games. And we also, our main burden was to come and justify how significant it is going to be when we invest in this education, video game in education system. And we'll give you an example of what happens in European